In the last video, we covered the 7 aspect dichotomies, the 7 properties that define each of the 8 information elements and set them apart from one another. Now we go a level deeper. Model A does not simply tell us which elements are type processes, it tells us how. It assigns each element to a specific function position, and every position has a distinct role, a distinct level of strength, and a distinct relationship to motivation. 8 elements, 8 positions, none of them equal, none of them isolated. This is the architecture of the psyche. This is what Model A actually shows us. Model A arranges the 8 function positions in a grid, 4 rows, 2 columns. Each row is a block. Each block is defined by the same 3 properties, where it sits in awareness, how strong it is, and whether it is motivated. The top block is the ego, positions 1 and 2, leading and creative, strong, valued, public. This is the core of the type, the area of greatest competence and greatest motivation. It sets the agenda, it calls the shots. Someone does not choose to operate from their ego block. It is simply where they function by default. Below that is the superego, positions 3 and 4, role and vulnerable, weak, neglected, public. This is the most uncomfortable region of the psyche. Both positions are visible. The outside world can see them operating, but neither is handled well nor cared about. Role is the performance put on under external pressure, crude, inconsistent, and deeply unnatural. Vulnerable is the complete blind spot, the element so beyond the type's understanding that it cannot even recognize why it matters. Below that is the superid, positions 5 and 6, suggestive and mobilizing, weak, but valued, private. The type cannot provide what these positions carry, but it prizes them deeply. These are unfulfilled needs the type knows not how to satisfy for itself. They operate below awareness most of the time. Mobilizing reaches ambitiously toward those needs, but it overestimates itself and can backfire badly. Suggestive simply holds the need quietly, and when someone else supplies what it carries, the effect is immediate and restorative. This is where the structural basis of dual attraction lies. At the bottom is the id, positions 7 and 8, ignoring and demonstrative, strong, neglected, private, high competence, low priority. These positions operate quietly in the background, largely taken for granted. The capability here is real, but we will come back to exactly how strong in the next section. The ego and superego together form the mental layer, the 4 public functions that operate in conscious awareness. The superid and id together form the vital layer, the 4 private functions that operate beneath it. These are the traditional names for what we have been calling public and private, mental and vital, 2 rings of 4. Now look at the numbering on screen. Notice that 4 sits to the left of 3 and 6 sits to the left of 5. That is not an accident. The functions do not number top to bottom, they number in rings. The mental ring runs clockwise, add to 1, 2, 3, 4, and back to 1. The vital ring runs anti-clockwise, 5, 6, 7, 8, and back to 5. The 2 rings turn in opposite directions. Keep that in mind, it will matter later. Before going through each position, we need to understand how Model A measures strength. It uses dimensions. A function's dimensionality is its depth of competence. A 4-dimensional function is fully rounded. It handles its element with complete mastery. Across all circumstances, in time, in space, across different situations, across different subjects. It does not need to deliberate. It simply acts. A 3-dimensional function is highly competent, but not fully masterful. It handles most situations well, but lacks the complete situational range of a 4-dimensional function. It needs a moment when conditions change. A 2-dimensional function grasps its element in familiar conditions. It can perform, but push it into unfamiliar territory, and the effort shows. A 1-dimensional function has only the most primitive grasp of its element, a single mode, a single context, the first dimension, and nothing beyond it. Here is how the positions map. 4-dimensional, leading and demonstrative. 3-dimensional, creative and ignoring. 2-dimensional, role and mobilizing. One-dimensional, vulnerable, and suggestive. Notice something. The two strongest positions are in opposite blocks, leading in the ego, demonstrative in the id. The two weakest positions are also in opposite blocks, vulnerable in the superego, suggestive in the superid. And if you look further, every dimensionality level has one position in the mental ring and one in the vital ring. Strength is not concentrated at the top, it is distributed symmetrically across the whole model. Notice something else. Dimensionality is not an independent property sitting above the rest of the model. It falls directly out of combinations of the function dichotomies. Each dimensionality level is defined by exactly 3 of them. We will see how, in the next section, these dimensionality values do not change. They are structural. Effort, practice, and experience do not raise a function's dimensionality. Someone with a one-dimensional suggestive will always have a one-dimensional suggestive. That is not a limitation to overcome. It is simply the architecture of their type. Model A describes each function position along 7 dichotomies. We have already covered 2 of them, strong and weak, the strength axis, directly tied to dimensionality, and public and private, the mental and vital rings. Those 2 dichotomies define the 4 blocks. Valued and neglected we have also touched on, but only at block level. At position level it is worth being precise. Positions 1, 2, 5, and 6 are valued. Positions 3, 4, 7, and 8 are neglected. This is motivation, not ability. Neglected does not mean incapable, and valued does not mean strong. The superid demonstrates this precisely. Its positions are weak and valued simultaneously. Some traditions use the term subdued in place of neglected. The remaining 4 dichotomies cut across the blocks in ways that do not follow the block boundaries. They are what make each position fully distinct from every other, obvious versus subtle. Positions 1, 3, 6, and 8 are obvious. Positions 2, 4, 5, and 7 are subtle. Obvious functions express themselves openly and visibly. Their operation is apparent to the outside world. Subtle ones work quietly and beneath the surface. Their operation is felt rather than seen. Some traditions call these bold and cautious, constant versus variable. Positions 1, 4, 5, and 8 are constant. Positions 2, 3, 6, and 7 are variable. A constant function is stable and consistent in its operation regardless of context. A variable function is more situational. Its expression shifts depending on circumstance. Some traditions use the terms evaluating and situational for the same distinction, stubborn versus flexible. Positions 1, 4, 6, and 7 are stubborn. Positions 2, 3, 5, and 8 are flexible. Stubborn functions hold a fixed orientation and resist deviation. Flexible functions adapt and bend to what is required of them. In other traditions, these are called inert and contact, demanding versus supplying. Positions 1, 3, 5, and 7 are demanding. Positions 2, 4, 6, and 8 are supplying. Demanding functions set the agenda. Supplying functions serve it. In other traditions, these are called accepting and producing. 7 dichotomies. No 2 positions share the same combination. Each position is fully distinct, and the point carried forward from the last section. Dimensionality is not independent of these dichotomies. It falls directly out of 3 of them. 4-dimensional means strong, constant, and obvious. 3-dimensional means strong, variable, and subtle. 2-dimensional means weak, variable, and obvious. 1-dimensional means weak, constant, and subtle. Dimensionality is a derived property. The 7 dichotomies are the foundation everything else is built on. 3 of the 7 dichotomies, valued versus neglected, stubborn versus flexible, and obvious versus subtle, combine to produce 4 approach types. Every function position approaches its element in one of these 4 ways. Assertive, positions 1 and 6, leading and mobilizing, valued, stubborn, and obvious. These positions act on their element with confidence. They push, they do not hold back. Collaborative, positions 2 and 5, creative and suggestive, valued, flexible, and subtle. These positions work with rather than against. Creative quietly serves, leading. Suggestive quietly seeks support from outside, reluctant. Positions 3 and 8, role and demonstrative, neglected, flexible, and obvious. These positions engage when they must. They show, but they do not care. Intransigent. Positions 4 and 7, vulnerable and ignoring, neglected, stubborn, and subtle. These positions hold a fixed orientation and resist change. Vulnerable refuses help, ignoring refuses to change direction. Note the pairings, assertive and intransigent, are both stubborn, one valued, one neglected. Collaborative and reluctant are both flexible, one valued, one neglected. The stubborn approaches act regardless of circumstance, the flexible approaches respond to it, and every approach type bridges both rings. One position, mental, one vital. Assertive pairs leading with mobilizing. Collaborative pairs creative with suggestive. Reluctant pairs role with demonstrative. Intransigent pairs vulnerable with ignoring. The same approach always spans conscious and unconscious, public and private. Each approach type runs through the whole psyche. Now for each position in detail. Leading, four-dimensional, valued, public, constant, stubborn, demanding, obvious. This is the center of the psyche. Everything passes through it. Someone operates from their leading function by default, so pervasively that all other functions are assessed and used from its perspective. It has such deep familiarity with its element that even when it makes errors, it does not lose confidence. It assumes others share its view. It does not explain itself. It acts. Take someone who leads with laws. Everything they encounter is assessed for logical consistency and structural integrity first. That is not a choice. It is simply how the psyche is oriented: creative, three-dimensional, valued, public, variable, flexible, supplying, subtle. The leading functions assistant. It does not set the agenda, it executes it. Flexible and subtle, it adjusts to what leading requires and delivers it cleanly. Where leading makes a statement, creative asks, how do we get there? Less pronounced in its expression. Only actively engaged on a situational basis. But indispensable. Someone cannot enact their leading function without their creative. Role, two-dimensional, neglected, public, variable, flexible, demanding, obvious. The performed function, public, the outside world can see it, but uncomfortable to use, crude, inconsistent, and unnatural. When social pressure demands it, someone shifts to their role function. They go through the motions, they perform, and the moment the pressure lifts, they drop the performance and revert. The role function is the diametric counterpart to leading, the same orientation, the opposite domain. That is why it feels so foreign. It is operating against the grain, vulnerable, one-dimensional, neglected, public, constant, stubborn, supplying, subtle, the blind spot, the single weakest position in the system. One-dimensional means only the most primitive grasp of its element, and because it is stubborn and constant, it resists both change and help. It is not merely weak, it is actively rejected. Someone does not merely fail at their vulnerable element, they cannot see why that element matters. This is the position that trips up mobilizing, its block partner in the super-id. We will return to that. Suggestive, one-dimensional, valued, private, constant, flexible, demanding, subtle. The unfulfilled need, weak but prized. Someone values their suggestive element deeply, often more than they consciously realize, but they cannot provide it for themselves. It operates beneath awareness most of the time. Yet when someone who carries that element in their leading function engages with them, the effect is immediate and restorative. This is not incidental. This is the structural basis of dual attraction. The suggestive element of one type is the leading element of its dual. That is the whole of it. Mobilizing, two-dimensional, valued, private, variable, stubborn, supplying, obvious, aspiration. The position that reaches higher than it can consistently deliver, it values what suggestive holds and tries to provide it, loudly, ambitiously, with more confidence than its two-dimensional competence can sustain. It overextends, it sometimes crashes, but it returns because the goal is genuinely prized. When functioning well, mobilizing shores up the suggestive. When it overreaches, it falls into the vulnerable's territory and hubris follows. Ignoring, three-dimensional, neglected, private, variable, stubborn, demanding, subtle. The suppressed counterpart to leading. Three-dimensional, highly competent, but unwanted. This is the functional inversion of the leading element, where leading moves in one direction, ignoring moves in the opposite one, and the type finds that direction uninteresting and unrewarding. It stays quiet. It does not engage unless leading explicitly calls on it. Capable, but not worth the time. Demonstrative, four-dimensional, neglected, private, constant, flexible, supplying, obvious. The paradox. Equal in raw strength to leading, both are four-dimensional, but treated as menial. Demonstrative operates as a constant background process, feeding creative with raw material that creative then shapes and delivers. It is taken entirely for granted. Because it is neglected and private, someone barely notices when it surfaces. But it surfaces constantly, an offhand display of mastery that barely registers as remarkable. The demonstrative element is the type's second strongest element and its most overlooked one. The 8 positions do not operate in isolation. Model A identifies 4 interactions, relationships between pairs of positions that share the same element domain but sit in opposite blocks, one mental and one vital. The 4 interactions are organized along 2 axes, strong versus weak and stubborn versus flexible. Strong and stubborn produces domination. Strong and flexible produces mastery. Weak and stubborn produces hubris. Weak and flexible produces struggle. Domination. Leading and ignoring. Both strong, both stubborn, both demanding. Someone keeps their ignoring function contained. It is there when needed, three-dimensional, competent, available, but leading holds authority over it. Leading dictates, ignoring waits. This is the area of total certainty. The type knows its ground here, and it defends it. Mastery, creative and demonstrative, both strong, both flexible, both supplying. These two operate in fluid interplay. Demonstrative feeds. Creative constantly from below. Creative shapes and delivers. Neither position struggles with its element. Because neither struggles, the interaction runs automatically, effortless, adaptive, resourceful. It is rarely noticed. It simply runs. Struggle, role, and suggestive. Both weak, both demanding, both flexible. This is the area of tension. Someone needs what suggestive holds, but cannot provide it for themselves. Meanwhile, they are stuck performing role, a function they neither value nor handle well. They adapt grudgingly. They wait for relief from outside. This is where the pull toward the dual type is felt most keenly and most urgently. Hubris, vulnerable and mobilizing, both weak, both stubborn, both supplying. Mobilizing reaches for what vulnerable cannot see. It overestimates its competence in that domain, overextends and stumbles, falling into precisely the blind spot it was trying to transcend. The ambition is genuine, the execution fails. This is the area of characteristic overreach, recognizable across all 16 types. Beyond the 4 interactions, Model A identifies 4 transitions. Movements between opposing positions, moments when one position gives way to another. The 4 transitions follow the same structural logic as the interactions. They are organized by public versus private and demanding versus supplying. Public and demanding produces masking. Public and supplying produces substitution. Private and demanding produces distraction. Private and supplying produces growth. Masking, leading to role, public, obvious, demanding. When external pressure forces someone to act against the grain of their leading function, they shift, briefly and uncomfortably, to role. They go through role in small pushes, then retreat the moment they can. This is unnatural, effortful, it does not last. They return to leading the moment they are able. Masking interfaces directly with struggle. It is what happens when the struggle interaction becomes unavoidable. Substitution, vulnerable to creative, public, subtle, supplying. Because vulnerable is genuinely unable to provide its element, creative steps into the gap by default. It compensates automatically and constantly. It is what keeps the type functioning in that domain. But it also ensures the blind spot is less visible. Vulnerability is papered over. And because the gap is always filled by creative, hubris always follows. Substitution sustains mastery but guarantees hubris. growth. Demonstrative to mobilizing, private, obvious, supplying. Confidence built through demonstrative use gradually extends to mobilizing. Low-stakes expression becomes higher-stakes reach. This is the healthiest of the four transitions, one that enables genuine development in the superid, but it is fragile. Hubris can shatter it entirely. When confidence breaks, the type retreats to demonstrative, distraction, suggestive to ignoring, private, subtle, demanding. When suggestive is not being fed from outside, someone temporarily redirects attention to ignoring, a short circuit, a way of managing an unfulfilled need that cannot be met internally. The effect dissipates after use, but while it is active, the type is closed to external input via the suggestive. The very thing it needs cannot get in. That is Model A's account of the 8 function positions: strong and weak, valued and neglected, public and private, obvious and subtle, constant and variable, stubborn and flexible, demanding and supplying. 7 dichotomies, 2 rings, 4 blocks, 8 positions, 4 interactions, 4 transitions, 16 types, 1 coherent system, but it is not the whole system. Everything we have covered in this video represents what Model A can see: the mental layer and the vital layer, the public and private halves of the psyche as classical socionics understands them. 4 blocks derived from 3 dichotomies, interactions and transitions derived from the same structural logic. A complete internal architecture. But an architecture with a boundary. There is a second layer, invisible to Model A, a layer that Model A has no tools to show. In the next video, we introduce the framework developed by Kimani White and Alicia Lowry that extends Model A into territory it cannot reach. 8 additional positions, 16 elements instead of 8, a complete account of the Sochian that classical analysis has never been able to give. That is where we are going.